everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Laura Creeby. I'm based in Massachusetts, and I'm the elementary program manager and coach for all of our elementary schools across the network. And I also work with the admissions team and parents. And I love to talk about our elementary virtual program. So I'm really excited to kind of dive in with you all today and get started with some information. So that we can help answer any questions you have, help you make a really informed decision for your children at home. Let's see, do we have anyone else in the waiting room at the moment? I don't see
No, I think you're good to start, Laura.
Okay, great. Let me just get my presentation up and running. Sometimes my technology is having a bit of a case of the Mondays. So thanks for bearing with me for a second, and thanks again for joining us. So I'll start sharing and we'll talk about elementary virtual school. I'm going to do what I normally do with the children and just make sure everyone can see it. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Thanks so much. And I'm going to just maximize you all so I can see your faces as well. Great. So I'm very proud of our Guidepost Elementary virtual program. We've been able to watch this wonderful program grow over the past almost 10 months now, which is amazing to say. And so it's been a labor of love, just watching everybody come together from all different states and regions and areas, and even some international students and families we have with us now. So it's been really wonderful to watch how we can offer an authentic Montessori experience online, fully online. We also do offer the hands-on materials, which I'll go over as well, which helps to make it a really real and concrete experience for all the students. But it's just, I feel like we've made the impossible possible here with the elementary program. And it's just been a wonderful thing to watch continue grow. And so I'm excited to talk to you about it in detail today. So some of you may be familiar with Montessori, and if you are, then these principles may look familiar to you, and we'll talk about how they relate to in a virtual setting. If they're new to you, I'll also describe them a little bit in detail. So one of the central tenets of Montessori philosophy and the approach to education is that it is child-centered. Child-centered and child-driven. We really want it to be motivating and interesting and reaching a child at wherever they are at. And so in order to make sure that a child's having an experience that they are driving, we need to offer a lot of choice. So just as in the Montessori physical classroom where there would be a work cycle and children will receive lessons and then make choices about what they want to follow up on, we do the same thing virtually. So we do have a full classroom setting where everyone joins the same Zoom room, but they receive small group lessons just like they would in a classroom. And then when they're not in a lesson, the children are moving throughout their independent work cycle, making choices. So they might choose to work on a research project that they've initiated. They might choose to work on a writing piece that they've just received a lesson on recently. They might choose to work on some math practice with one of their math materials that they have in their home. So they do incorporate a lot of choice, just like they would in an authentic physical brick and mortar classroom. It's choice within limits, of course. So there is a lot of order that we put into our environment, our prepared environment online. Just as if you were in a physical Montessori classroom and you'd see the different areas, you'd see a math area with these shelves curated with gorgeous wooden materials for every subject area around the classroom. We do the same thing online, and we use a platform which I'll give you a little tour of in a few minutes called the Altitude Learning Platform, and that's where we provide this sense of order, where there is choice within limits, where every lesson that the child has received is available for them to choose from. And they will choose a card, which is what we call a work in the Altitude platform. And it's just like pulling a tray off the shelf in a Montessori classroom where they'll have everything they need to conduct that work and that practice, including control of error, including any supplies they might need, any steps they need, also some room for creativity. We also keep our Montessori environments virtually. We do have them be multi-age as well, just like they would be in a physical classroom. So we do have first, second, and third graders all together in an elementary environment, and we have fourth, fifth, and sixth graders in an upper elementary environment. So we do have multi-age classrooms where the children can learn to lead and be led with grace and courtesy. They can learn from each other as much as their guides. They can partner up in different ways. They can mentor each other. And they can have role models if they're a younger student, and be a role model if they're one of the older students. So there's wonderful opportunities to be had in terms of learning from peers in a multi-age environment online. We know that movement is central to Montessori education as well. Freedom of movement. Children can usually choose where they work. They might feel very comfortable at a table. They might feel comfortable on a work mat, on the rug. And so we are able to offer that as well. Of course, in a lesson, they're going to be in, when they're invited to a lesson, they're going to attend at their desk on their computer or device. But when they are doing their independent choice, they can sort of move away from the computer screen. They can work with a beautiful wooden checkerboard on the floor. They can work on some research with some books, on a couch in another room. So there is a lot of freedom of choice in terms of like flexible workspaces, and also movement in general is just really important. We want the child to be able to get up and move. We do not expect anyone to sit in front of a Zoom screen for 6 hours, though the guide is there available for them that whole time. We do expect the children will need to get up and exercise. They will need to have a lunch break with a recess, where they get to play outside, hopefully, or maybe engage with some siblings or family members. And we also do some actual organized movement, intentional group movement experiences. So oftentimes, either in the morning or after lunch, the guide will lead a yoga or a dance, or maybe an obstacle course or a scavenger hunt, or some calisthenics or something. There's always a chance for movement as well. We really want to respond to the child's whole self. This is a whole child learning, and their body and physical needs are a big part of it. This is all within the context of the Montessori curriculum, which is, it lives in the guides albums that they've received in their training. All of our lead guides are trained in Montessori elementary ages. They are all experienced in delivering these lessons to children. And they are all led from the cosmic curriculum or from the great lessons. So if you're new to Montessori, the great lessons are these really beautiful stories that sort of kick off each subject area. So there's the story of language, the story of numbers, the story of the universe, things like that. And they'll kind of launch these wonderful explorations in areas of study. So that all happens online as well. And this is made possible because we have two teachers in every classroom. At least one of them is always Montessori certified. Sometimes both of them are, but there's always a lead guide and an assistant guide. And what that makes possible is for the children to be supported the whole school day, whether they're in a lesson or not. So most online, settings, or children that are receiving their public school education, but in an online setting, they're not able to have these small group lessons. So it's really difficult for the teacher and the students, where there might be 25, 30 students on a Zoom room receiving, like just listening to a guide for different, 20-minute increments all day long. That's really, really hard. For everybody involved. Here, we are able to keep the Zoom room open the whole day. Children all sign on, they are greeted by both of their guides, and then they start being invited into a small group lesson where everyone will remain in the main room, and a guide will say, hey, these 4 students are going to come with me to work on sentence analysis or multiplication, and they'll go into a breakout room while the rest of the students are with the assistant guide, making their independent work choices and practicing and following up on the lessons they've already had. And that cycle repeats. So there's a 2.5-hour cycle in the morning. We'll go over the schedule actually, and I'll be able to go over this in more detail. But there are ways for students to have full group experiences, individual work experiences, and small group lessons individualized to their particular skill level and their interests. Those are some of the ways that we translate Montessori into a virtual setting and really stay true to all the principles that you saw. We do adapt the principles in a way that is true to the philosophy, in the way that fosters children's choice and independence, and making sure that there is a combination of sort of online synchronous lessons being presented, as well as offline learning, where that, like I said, the child will sort of move away from their computer screen. It's still on, it's available, they're logged into the Zoom, but they can go work on the floor while other children are receiving lessons. They can practice their math facts, or their writing, or doing research, like I said, or something that inspires them. Science experiments, as you see here. So some of the components of the virtual school program are that, as I mentioned, they will receive direct online instruction from Montessori trained guides every day. So from Monday through Friday, this is a full-time, full school day program. There's 6-hour school days with an hour break for lunch and movement. And there's 2.5-hour work periods each day. And so we'll go, when I show you the schedule, we'll go over those periods in a little more detail. It does involve individualization in the form of varied programming that meets the unique needs of each child at different developmental stages. Again, this is made possible by having 2 teachers in the classroom. So the teachers are constantly observing and doing authentic assessments of the child and where they're at and how their learning is progressing and where their areas of growth are, so that they can target their lessons just to that child or a small group of children at a similar place in their learning. Lessons are very responsive and adaptive to individual student needs. So if there is a child who, maybe needs a different mode of delivery, maybe they need some more visuals, or maybe they need a different reading level, or maybe they need a video to accompany a verbal lessons, or written instructions to accompany verbal lessons. All those things are made possible in the Altitude Learning Platform, so that all children can get the same information in whatever way that they really need it, and that speaks to them. We also send actual physical Montessori materials right to your home. So that way they can receive the lesson online. The teacher will present a lesson on a new material in a couple of different ways. They'll use online virtual versions of the material so that they can actually see how to move the pieces around. And sometimes the guides will actually put a different camera up and demonstrate with their own materials in their home, so that children can get both views of how to use the material and get the correct modeling and use. And so that way, when they go off and practice with the brand new, beautiful wooden material, they'll know exactly how to use it on their own. And so we'll offer a little bit more information about that in a second. I did want to show you a couple of real lessons just to give you a sense of kind of a full group lesson, what it looks like to have a discussion on a Zoom room with all of these children in the same room, and how they participate, and how they offer grace and courtesy, and how they kind of navigate this type of a group discussion. And then we're also going to offer a glimpse into one of these small group lessons with just a few students. So this is in one of our upper elementary East Coast classrooms with Miss Rachel and Mr. Rob. And I'm just going to get started. And then after the videos, we can talk a little bit about, we'll have a small break for some questions.
What does it mean to have a monopoly? And this is what the game Monopoly is based on, but I would like to hear a definition that doesn't involve the game. What does it mean, Oliver, to have a monopoly?
It means having a series of stores that you own, basically.
Okay, if you own a bunch of stores, you could possibly have a monopoly, but it doesn't just mean stores. John, what does monopoly mean?
So it's like when you have like a lot of it, and you're the biggest, the most of one area, kind of.
Right.
And that means that like nobody else can compete.
Right, because you have a monopoly, meaning you own, like if you are playing the game Monopoly and you end up owning all of one color properties, and you build your houses and you build your apartments, I mean, that's always the goal. That's a monopoly, because you own all of that area, or all of those stores, or all of the businesses, or all of the products. You can have a monopoly. Arush, do you have anything else to add to that? Arush, is your sound still not working? Okay. Well, you can chat if you want. Ariana, do you have anything else to add? I'm sure your goal is to have a monopoly in things one day.
Oh, yes. My mom told me about this in the car. So I'm like, when I grow up, I'm going to move to like deserted like place and build all this stuff. And like, well, actually I said, you know what I want in this country? So there would be only one company in like a long area. So it's like, well, you don't really have a choice. Like that's the only place. That means like a monopoly and like that you're the only place they can go to and you're the only
Like kind of like that Wall-E movie. Like there's only one company called like something, but I don't know what it's called, but it was just one company and only one.
I have not seen Wall-E, but yes, that definitely sounds like a monopoly. Can anybody think of any ways in which that could be bad? Having a monopoly, could that be a bad thing, Isabel?
Because if you would need like, let's say Ariana would be selling cookies, and if you needed apples or like something healthier than cookies and you couldn't find it and that's the only place you could go, then that would be bad because you would need that food to survive.
Okay, so it could mean that you don't have as much choice. How else could it be a bad thing? Freddie?
Well, as you said, they have a monopoly over it. And since they're the only one that sells that medicine, they can put the price whatever they choose. And there's nothing to be like, hey, well, these people sell it at this price because they have the monopoly on it. There's no competitor.
Right.
So that's just a little glimpse into kind of one of these deep discussions that you can have in a really wonderful way with the full group, and everyone gets to participate. So some of the younger students might be learning these, ways to talk about these things from the older students. They all, as you can tell, have the grace and courtesy down, which is the ways that we kind of relate to each other and follow classroom norms and routines in order to be really respectful. So it's a wonderful classroom environment that they have set up here. And there's a big focus on having these group community discussions and getting to know everybody and hearing everybody's voice. And then we have a customized small group lessons too. So this one is just a few students, as you'll notice, and they are receiving a lesson on a very specific material for a very specific purpose. And as you'll see, they'll talk a little bit about recalling some prior knowledge about this work and then thinking about the next steps of how they're going to use it.
What? Wasn't there something you were going to be doing this afternoon?
Horseback riding?
You're going to go horseback riding. So I think what I'm going to put is Casson rode a horse. Casson rode a horse. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and put that right with my materials. So Casson rode a horse. So we are going to use this red circle to represent what? Who knows what this red circle is used for? Oliver?
It's the predicate and it's used for the verb.
You're right. It's the predicate and it's used for the verb or the action word. So in the sentence, Casson rode a horse. What's our predicate? Wyatt, what's our predicate? What's our action word in the sentence? Casson rode a horse.
Road.
Road. You're exactly right. So you know what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to underline road. So that's going to always be the first step that you do, is that you underline your predicate. You underline your action word. And now what I'm going to do is I'm even going to tear it. It's going to stand on its own. And I'm going to put that red circle above it. Okay, I'm going to put that red circle above it. And then what we get to do is we get to ask ourselves a series of questions. Who is it that rode? So who is it that rode? Who is it that rode? Elia, who is it that rode?
My sister Casson.
Your sister Casson, which I'm just going to put down as Casson. All right. And Casson rode what? Casson rode what? Casson rode what, Oliver?
A horse.
Casson rode a horse, exactly. So who is it that's going to be the bigger circle? And Casson wrote what? That's going to be the smaller circle. Now, here's the funky thing about your arrows. They've got the questions on them. They've got the questions on them, but they don't have anything on the other side. And usually you're going to see something on the other side. So you actually can take this opportunity with your materials if you want, and you could put labels on the other side. How do you think you could do that? How do you think you could put labels on the other side? Yes, what do you think, Oliver? You're on mute, Oliver.
With a metallic Sharpie.
Okay, this is one of the, maybe the only times that I'm ever going to tell you, yes, you can write on your materials. You could write on your materials. So for the one, just listen, for the one that says, who is it that, or what is it that? What part of the sentence is that? What could you write on your arrow? You know, this is the predicate. So who is it that, or what is it that? And remember, we found out that it was Casson. What do you think, Oliver?
You just write the exact same thing on the other side.
No, you're right. You would write on the other side what part of the sentence that is.
Oh, subject.
Subject. So you could actually write, or maybe you could even get, I have a label maker that I love. I don't know about you guys, but maybe you could even make a label instead of writing on it, and you could write subject.
But those are black ink.
So we've got our subject. We've got our predicate. And then Casson rode what? Casson rode a horse. Does anybody know what we call that? Does anybody know what we call that? Yes, Oliver.
The object.
The object. And you know what we're actually going to do is we are going to go even more specific, and it's called the direct object.
So this is an example of just a very targeted small group lesson. As you can see, that was 4 minutes of it. The lessons are usually very short. It might be 10, 15 minutes max for a new presentation, because what we believe is that the learning happens in the practice, not in the moment where the teacher is presenting something. So in Montessori, there's a 3-period lesson, which means the first period is when things are presented. The second period is when things are mastered. And the third is sort of when they're applied or when they can be recalled and used. So this is sort of just the first period, which is why it's short. The children will go back and practice with this material on their own time every day for a few days, or maybe even a couple of weeks until there's mastery. And then they kind of move on to the next thing. And the teacher is constantly doing assessment to make sure that the children are understanding every new concept that's introduced. Okay, so here's an example of the schedule, a typical day in a Montessori classroom. So the day there's not times on here because it differs based on the time zone. So if you are in the East Coast or Central time zone, the class day will start at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. All those kids are mixed together and then in several classrooms. But those time zones are the students from all those states will be in the same rooms together. And then if you're in the Mountain and Pacific time zones, the class will start at 9 Pacific, 10 Mountain time. So that's why the times aren't on here, because there's 4 different times. So every classroom, regardless of the time they start, will join in together. So all the teachers and all of the students will join. They'll have a morning meeting. They sometimes do some activities first thing in the morning where they do like an I Spy sort of game, which is through the Smithsonian, or they might do a journal writing prompt with some sort of creative sentence starter that they'll have to finish their sentence. They might do something on this day in history where they'll talk about the date. So they do a lot of things to kind of engage the students right from the first minute of the day. And then they kind of go over attendance. They might discuss anything special about that day, any projects or presentations that are going to receive. And then they move into the 2-hour work cycle. So where students will start their work, they will go on the Altitude Learning platform. They'll see what lessons they need to practice, and they'll start making their choices. And the lead guide will start inviting students into these small group lessons like you just saw. There was only 4 students in there, right? So that means that the rest of the 15 students or so were working on something else. They were choosing their work based on what the lessons they've had so far. Then they have some guides will actually put a snack and stretch break right into the schedule at a certain interval. Sometimes guides will just leave it up to the student to take care of those needs when they need it, as long as it's not like right within a lesson. The lessons are so short that you don't need to have a snack or be using the restroom during a lesson, but some of the teachers decide to schedule that in, and some of them leave it more open-ended for the students to respond to their own physical needs. They have a built-in lunch break for an hour. Sometimes the students, the guide will allow the students to kind of come back early or stay on a little bit later, just so they can have that unstructured sort of social time with their friends, supervised, of course. And then other times they just let them get off the screen for that hour, go play outside if they can, and, connect with their family members, make a healthy lunch, and come back when they're ready. They come back usually to join a read aloud. That might be in the form of a chapter book that they might be reading a couple of chapters and talking about as a group, or they might be reading a very specific sort of standalone story, maybe a biography or something about something scientific that they're studying at the moment. But they do that all together and they talk about it together as a group. And then they go off into their own independent work again. Sometimes in the afternoon, they use it for art appreciation lessons or writing groups or lit circle, novel study groups, things like that are, small group, but in a certain subject area. And then they also come together one more time for the third time as a full group for a closing gathering. This is where they might recap the day a little bit, just have a closing. They might do a positive share where the students are allowed to share something positive from their day. Or they might schedule presentations. So they might use the end of the day to have students present their work to each other. So, and this can serve as sort of inspiration and motivation for the other students to do so. And it might just be sort of like presenting something that they're really proud of or feel that they have mastered or experienced some growth in. So this is a good point to kind of like answer any questions you have so far. We've gone over some of the logistics of the program. So if you want to, if anything's on your mind and you want to ask a question right now, we have a few minutes to answer that. Otherwise, we'll offer some time at the end. Has anything come up in the chat yet? I'm not sure if people are using it. If you want to, if there's any themes in there I should touch upon for everybody.
Laura, there's a question about lunch. Is lunch 3 hours after the start?
2.5 hours. Yeah. So normally there's a 2.5 hour work cycle in the morning, an hour break, and then another 2.5 hour work cycle in the afternoon. So if a class starts at 9, they'll break at 11:30. If a class starts at 9:30, they'll break at noon. Does that answer the question? I think I understood. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we can move on. If there's nothing else, we'll definitely allow some time for more questions at the end. Oops, sorry. So we also, in addition to having the Altitude Learning Platform, which is our prepared Montessori environment online, we also offer support to parents in preparing your environment at home. You will be shipped all your school supplies and all of these materials on a regular cadence. And so we do sort of offer some guidance around like making your child's workspace really accessible so they can be independent. I want to show you another quick clip of a child opening one of these material kits and getting to see some of the materials that they're familiar with and that they're really excited about.
So we got the bead painting and some points thingies.
What do those represent, do you know?
Point. 1. And this looks like, I don't know what this is.
I think that's for your beatbox, yeah.
I don't know what to put that. Number 2. Should we open this and see what's inside?
Sure.
We're opening it. And it's the stamp game! Yes, this is at my school! We got 10 stamps, 1,000 stamps, 100 stamps, 1 stamps, and of these.
Exciting.
All right. Looks like paper. No,
Want to turn around?
I don't know what this is. Looks like
What does it say?
paper. Does it say large bead frame paper? All right.
So as you can see, he recognized some of the things and that some of the things were probably going to be new. So each material kit is catered to a certain child's general grade level. So there's a lot of overlap, obviously, in Montessori because we have a 3-year cycle for students to master things. But we also know that there are some materials that are used a lot. So the stamp game is something that is a very beloved material. It is used for many years in the elementary years because it uses it covers all 4 operations. So it goes from addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And it introduces and helps students practice in a really concrete way all of those operations and exchanges and static and dynamic operations. So that's something that most of our elementary students will get just because it's prolifically used in the elementary years. Large bead frame paper probably meant that there was also a large bead frame in there that the students will use for some slightly more abstract versions of those operations as well. So that's just kind of a glimpse into one of the material packs that students will get, and their guides will get the same thing, and so that they can demonstrate the correct usage of them and allow them to practice on in a concrete way. So again, we do respect the planes of development that Maria Montessori observed in terms of children having sensitive periods and being attuned to certain styles of learning at different ages. So we do have lower elementary grades, 1 through 3 in a classroom together, and upper elementary grades 4 through 6 in a classroom together. So that way the guide can cater to the developmental needs of those age ranges, while recognizing there is a huge range even there. There might be some children on the very young end of the spectrum in 1st grade, and there might be some children who are on the older end of the 3rd grade end, and they can also get every single lesson they need. Even if they're a 3rd grader working at a 5th grade level, they can receive the lessons they are ready for at that time. That's what Montessori does. It really responds to the needs of every individual child, wherever they're at, meets them where they are, and kind of supports their growth and keeps them at the right level of challenge. So splitting the grades in these 2 ways allow that individualization and also that wide range of content that they can access no matter where they are. So just to kind of go over the components again, now that we've kind of talked a little bit about materials, a little bit about the structure, and a little bit about the schedule, we do have a mix of guide-led group gatherings, engaging work, regular feedback, and authentic accountability. These will all make a little more sense when we go into the Altitude Learning platform in a second. Open dialogue between parent and guide. This is something we feel very, very strongly about. In fact, I just came directly from a training on parent communication for all of our new virtual guides, elementary guides that are starting with us this week to open and launch our new classrooms that your children will be joining, hopefully. And so we really, really, really care about this relationship. It is not like a customer relationship. It is really a family relationship. We feel like you're part of the Guidepost family when you enroll, and that we really want to strengthen that relationship and build a lot of trust with you and keep you very well informed. This is really like having your child in a classroom down the street. We really want to make that feel very comfortable for you and the guide and the students. So we talk about this triangle of communication where the guide, the student, and the parent are all on the same page about everything. And so that's really important, that it's always an open dialogue and that you have direct access, and direct lines of communication always to your teachers. We also talked about the resources and materials that will be shipped to you to allow for independence and exploration and practice. Something that's really, really important to remember about the elementary student is just how social they are. This has been a really, really challenging time for a lot of students of the elementary age because they thrive on being around their peers. They want to know where they stand. They're developing their identity. And a lot of that comes from feedback and input of being in a social environment, navigating challenges, solving conflicts together in productive ways, learning kind of who they are and what roles they play in their community is really important. So I know that the impression might be that how could this possibly happen in a real way online? How could they possibly make friends? How can the guide possibly get to know them? But what happens is that they actually know each other almost more or at a different in a different way. The children, end up seeing so much of each other. They're seeing each other's faces whenever they're on this computer, and so they get to know each other really, really well. There's nothing stopping that. Even if we tried, we couldn't stop their social connections. They will find a way. So what we do is, instead of making the children find a way to connect at inopportune times, we allow for this connection. We encourage this connection. So a lot of the classrooms will start their day with a special share time. I was able to observe a few of these in one of our environments on the West Coast, where they actually have students from all different mountain and Pacific time states, and as well as Alaska. So there was a student I happened to see who, when it was her time to share, she talked about how it was still dark at noon and that a moose was just outside her window. And the students were so enthralled by that. And then on the other hand, we have students that are in the Virgin Islands. As you saw in one of those videos, someone was swinging amongst palm trees while they were paying attention to the lesson. So the children love to hear about these different experiences. When in your classroom, have you ever had children from 12 different states? Like, they are getting to know the world in such a unique way. The children ask for Zoom play dates. They ask each other for their parents' email address so they can Zoom on the weekends and get to know each other, maybe work on a special project that they both love, or connect over some special hobby that they're both into. They ask to be real pen pals too. They can share their addresses and get actual mail and write letters and get to connect each other that way. And the teacher gets to know them so well. There's so many wonderful opportunities to share, and get to know each other and build community and learn things together as a group and just kind of go through this experience together. It just really, it's a wonderful environment for social interaction. So finally, here we come to Altitude, which it kind of makes the whole thing work. This is a wonderful platform that we have now, that allows for sort of a single serve. It's just one sign on, so a single sign on, and then all the children needs to do is to click into the Altitude learning platform every day. They don't even need to like put in their password every day. It should kind of just continue to be there. Every now and then they might have to log in again. But as soon as they log in, they have the daily schedule, they have the classroom Zoom link, they have any other external links they might need, like for their IXL, which is where they'll practice their math facts and skills practice. They have links to any videos that might be relevant to their learning. And all of these cards. So if you see these little squares on the screen there, those are called cards because they look like a little square card. And once a child clicks into it, they see all of the things they need in order to complete or practice that work. So they'll see a checklist of different steps. First, you need to watch this video. Second, please take some notes. Third, please, choose how you'd like to present the information. Make a PowerPoint slide, make a poster at home, write up a piece of writing based on your research. So it will have everything they need to complete each work, and there's a way to submit the work. And so that way the teacher receives the work and can give some feedback. They might have a question about something and they'll ask the question right within the card, and the child can respond or fix an error that they might have found, and turn it in again. And there's this feedback loop right built within the platform as well. So it keeps the parent informed, the teacher informed, and the child informed about their work and their progress. It's also how, if you see the little blue bar up top, it's how students can create their own work portfolios and keep their best work samples. The guides can measure the progress and create progress reports that go out twice a year to families. They set goals with the students based on work habits or learning different learning skills. So it's really, really wonderful platform. It's like one-stop shopping for everything they need for their learning. And it's really user friendly, so the students can find everything they need in there and navigate it really independently. As young as 6 years old, they can do this by themselves, which is great. And so one of the things that is also made possible by Altitude is all these different versions of materials. So the Altitude learning platform will also, as you can see, if I go back one slide, you can see a little picture of the stamp game here. So this is a card that a student will click in and have certain problems to solve. So they might have a few multiplication problems, and they will either use their own physical stamp game material, or they will use an online version of the stamp game. And so they will practice and submit their work. And that way the teacher can see, oh, are you understanding how this material is used? Are you using it correctly? Are you coming to accurate answers? If not, I wonder where the error is and where we can fix it. Maybe there's a new lesson that you need. You've mastered this, or maybe you need a refresher lesson in order to do it more efficiently. So there's a lot that the Altitude platform allows for in terms of even physical material practice, and it will be very clear what the students need to do in order to complete their work. We also do different types of assessments. So in order to understand where each student is coming from, we do a ton of observation and authentic assessments. Every day the guides are observing and collecting information about what the students are learning. And like I said, doing lots of progress monitoring ongoing. But we also do use some actual data collecting sources, one of which really aligns well with Montessori, the Montessori approach. It's called the MAP growth test, and we do it twice a year as a benchmark just to get to know students. We have students coming from public school, private school, Montessori school, homeschool, all different settings from all different states. So we really love to get this benchmark information just about where they're at. And it's never used to compare one student to another, but it's used to see what skills the students are coming in with and then how they've built on those skills as the months go on. And the wonderful thing about the MAP growth test as compared to other sort of standardized testing is that it's adaptive. So it ends up being individualized to each student. The students sign in, it's done online. And as soon as they start answering questions, the test adapts to them and caters to the right level of challenge so that the students can access the test and really come out with a report about their skills, not just a random number. And the other wonderful thing is that the test results come within 24 hours. So the guide can use these results and look at exactly the skills that children need to practice and inform their instruction the very next day. So this isn't like, taking a test in May and not getting the results till August, and by then the child's not even in the same class anymore. It's really purposeful assessment. So we love to use it because it's very in line with Montessori in that it does adapt to the child, the individual child, and it does give actual usable information, not just random raw scores to the teacher. So it's really great. And if a child spends, several years with us, their progress is tracked on like several different graphs that you can access, and you can see their progress in every skill area over time. So that's really great too. So we do have a little bit of time for questions if you have any, or any sort of reactions or anything like that about the program. And here's just the next steps. So I don't know whether either CJ might want to go over this of how they might enroll, or we want to ask questions first, whatever comes to mind.